Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast, Mailbag Edition. Eric Scopel, Jared Mack on the show. I'm Matt Preem. All three of us back for the first time since we won't mention the game, but it wasn't pretty. But nonetheless, Mailbag is here. We've got a lot of questions. We're going to dive into it. Some football. I even think Eric threw in a basketball one at the very end. Are we transitioning a little slowly to basketball? Is that what we're doing here?
Well, it seems right. They keep winning.
Yeah.
They don't make it easy on you.
Men are good, yes.
Yeah, they don't make it easy on you, but they do find a way to win. So yeah, if you win, we talk about you a little bit. So yeah, we'll wrap up with that. But good to see everybody, man. It's been a minute. We were down in Los Angeles last I saw you all, and happy everybody made it back, and we're ready to dive into some off season here. First one is right in that vein. So we'll start here with a question from @Wayer Scott 63854. Biggest needs when the portal opens back up, and he has two suggestions: linebacker and offensive line. Before we even get into this, I almost wanted to, I don't know if this is counterproductive, but it might be almost more helpful to run through the positions we don't think they need to take anybody. Sure. Just almost do this as a process of elimination. Yeah. Like quarterback, they're pretty set there, right? Well, we think so.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No need.
Running back.
Now with Makai Hughes, probably no need.
It depends what Whittington does to me.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, I don't really like Jalen Lamar and Jay Harris that much. So if Noah Whittington is gone, maybe DeJuan Riggs steps up, but who knows? So maybe.
I have similar thoughts on Harris and Lamar too. So I'm with you there. Receiver, they locked in now that Stewart's back and all the young players.
Wouldn't hurt. I don't know.
I think they need another guy.
You do?
Yeah.
What kind of a player?
A lot like we talked about when the portal first opened, like another Trayshawn Holden, a guy that's 6'2", 6'3", really big, physical, can go across the middle, and can be a blocker. They don't have that. Dallas Wilson was supposed to be that. He was also, a freshman. We've seen freshmen don't play.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think they're missing something there. Just a little bigger physical guy.
Tight end?
No.
Always. I think they just need another bigger guy. After Jabari Johnson, I don't know who you're going to call upon. Is it Roger Saliapaga who's coming off a major injury? Is it AJ Pugliano who's coming off of a major injury? Is it Vander Plug who's never played a down of college football in his life? I don't know. I'm always a proponent of having two bigger guys, especially for a team that runs 12, 13, 14 personnel all the time.
I would say yes if they had 6 or 7 spots open, but they don't right now. But that could change in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And we should note Jamari also coming off season-ending ankle injury in October. So not that I think he's not available for fall, but just like this is another player who's also dealing with some sort of an injury.
Right.
I agree. I can see them taking one there. If they don't, to me, that's a vote of confidence for Saliapaga, who we don't know the severity of that injury. It didn't look great, but still a long time, obviously, until they get into next season. Okay. Offensive line. This one's interesting to me. I'm curious from where your guys' head are at, because while this was one of the positions the Scott included, it's not necessarily one that's like super top of mind to me, but maybe you guys disagree. Where are you guys at? Do you think they need to take another interior guy?
Only if it's like one of the top of the line fellas. I don't think it's necessary, especially if Bedford gets his if he gets his year of eligibility back for his waiver, but that hasn't been announced yet. We'll see if Oregon wants that to happen potentially. They might feel comfortable with the guys that they have already in the room. But I think it's another interior if he's the top of the line. If he's USC transfer, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head.
Emmanuel Pregnon.
Yeah, him. Then, yeah, I think that'd be a great addition. But I don't know if it's a necessity. Kind of similar to tight end.
Yes. I'm going yes. Very similar to what Jared's reasoning is for tight end is offensive line for me. Bedford, even if he comes back and gets the year back, like history has shown, he gets hurt. And I don't know if you can bank on him being available. I mean, we changed the position, but how all offseason ahead of the 2024 year, we talked about Jalil Florence and being ready to play and being a piece for the team. And he never played because his rehab didn't go correctly. We don't know how Bedford's rehab has gone. I would assume it's going well. He's been out there at practice, but I just think Pregnon is such a talented player. He's the number 2 player in the portal for offensive linemen. You've already got 2 others that are top 20 players in the portal, but with a 1-year rollover, I think it's worth taking another 1-year guy. There isn't a guy out there though that's like a multi-year player and that's worth taking.
Yeah, my thinking is you've got your tackles seemingly set up with your 2 portals with World and Harkey. Poncho's your center. Iuli, I thought, played pretty well towards the back half of last season. I think he's one of your guards. And then I guess Bedford's the real wild card here. A, does he get the waiver? And then B, does this ever work out where he looks like the player he was pre-injury? And if you're an Oregon fan, you just saw that, what was that, in 2023 with, his name's escaping me, Junior Anguilao, who showed up. He had the same kind of deal to come off a knee injury, and it just never worked. So maybe that contingency plan requires you take a Pregnon, but if Bedford's healthy, I think you're set there. But that's maybe me feeling too confident about an injury. And to Matt's point, a guy who's been pretty injury prone, even though he's only been on campus for a year at Oregon, he had some pretty significant stuff he worked through at Indiana. So I get it either way. I won't say I was surprised this was one of the positions Scott wanted to dive into. But I think it's a spot where they're in okay shape personally. Defensive line, where are you guys at there?
Sure.
I'm always going to say you can add more interior guys, kind of the same as offensive line. I don't think you can have too many bodies there. I think their 2 deep is pretty good right now. Gardner leaving, going to ASU was a little bit of a surprise. Probably the only surprise that's been in the offseason other than Marion Winston, to me at least. They could add another guy or 2. Again, I still don't know if there's any major name in the portal. I feel like this would have to be one of the high-profile names to add. I don't think they're just going to be, with as few spots as they have, they're not just going to be adding to adding like they have been maybe in years past, where they're, the whole roster is kind of reshuffling and going through its ups and downs. But this would have to be another big-time guy who potentially could come out in the spring like a Derek Harmon last year. But I think they could use another guy, but it's not a mandatory thing, I don't think.
Yeah, there's to Jared's point, if they can find a superstar, then do it by all means. But they don't need to take a guy just to simply take a guy. I think it's time that we see Amari Washington, Tione Gray, Aiden Breland, Jericho Johnson, Terrence Green, these guys start to play. Washington has. Breland saw some time in the Rose Bowl. But it's time for these guys to play. Plus, there's also the lingering of Jamari Caldwell coming back, which could be your portal ad, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Matt. I think if you get Caldwell back, I just don't see a need. And if he doesn't come back, I almost kind of feel, to your point, there's 5 or 6 young defensive interior guys that the staff has devoted a lot of recruiting efforts into, and then development. You just got to think you hit on a couple of those guys and enough that you don't need to go portal again. But to Jared's point, if there's a guy out there who's this guy could be a day 1 or 2 day draft pick in the next couple of drafts, I think you've got to take that guy.
It's got to be an NFL guy,
right?
Casey Rogers or Jordan Riley or Taki Tiumani were when they added them.
Linebacker. Yes. I do think this is one that's I'm just really interested. Jared, what's your thoughts here? Because I'm really interested in this particular spot. And what do we make of it now that Bryce is back? But there's not a whole lot other than Devin we've seen play on this team.
Yeah, that's the problem, is you would need depth with losing Jeff and Justin Jacobs as the other guys, along with Devin and Bryce, who are coming back. I mean, if you can find a guy, sure, go for it. I like the combination of Bryce and Devin, but Oregon did show some desire last year to move people around and shuffle them in and out with Devin and Jeff, and then Justin sometimes during the regular season, but really didn't see anything in the postseason. So I don't know. I think they have some talent in the back end there. This is one of a maybe for me, actually. I don't know if it needs to be a yes, because I like the talent that they have in the back with Jerry Mixon and Braden Platt. Like, they have different body sizes and shapes and strengths, and I think they could work with it. It just, it just depends if they have the confidence in it. And that's something that I don't know. I'm not a coach on the team. So it'll show you how they feel about their linebacker core if they go out and add another guy. But to me, I think this is a maybe. I think it really just depends if there's another big name that hits the portal at this point.
It's a yes for me, but the problem is there's no one in the portal worth taking.
Yeah, this is a spring edition potentially.
Yes. So, like, excuse me, they're gonna need to see someone hit the portal that's like an automatic take. Or they go through spring ball because the portal will open up after spring, and they will have a clear indicator of how the younger guys, like Jared's talking about, have developed. If they're not ready, then that will be a telling sign of where things are if they hit the portal, and it's not wow, this guy's a future first-round draft pick, whether it's not future first round, but he's a future NFL guy. It's just wherever he plays his next year of college football to get him there.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me too, because I kind of side with the idea that Jared had of, like, if they trust the young guys, it's kind of similar to the interior defensive line, then I just say roll with them. But we have so little insight into how good these guys are. Like, the true freshman class, basically none of them played at all. Jerry Mixon's played maybe 100 career snaps. That might even be too many to give him credit for. So there's just not really, to me, a sense at all of what the caliber of player behind these guys are, aside from recruiting rankings and kind of the hype from fall camp. So I could totally see them taking somebody if they don't feel good about the guys they have developing. But I also think, like, these were pretty highly regarded young players, and maybe you just hope you get one or two of them that are ready to go. But depth definitely doesn't feel quite as – you don't feel quite as good about the depth here as you do other spots, especially on defense, I think. All right, corner.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't. It would take a special player, so no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've already landed one, and they've recruited this from a prep perspective so damn well recently that if you and Jaleel Florence is kind of the wild card there of, like, that's
sure
a starter if he's healthy and if he's recovered and returning back to what he was in 23. So, yeah, I would be concerned about player development to a certain degree if they think they need to add another corner here, just based upon, like, this is 3 straight classes with top 150 corners, and then most recently 2 5-stars. So you got to think, like, amongst those half a dozen or so guys, like, at least a couple of them are going to be ready to contribute at some point.
So here's like a game to play. Let's just eliminate the 2025 signees and assume Jaleel is healthy. I'm still fine.
100%.
Not taking a portal guy. Like, that's how deep this group should be. Like, Sione and Jaleel being your starters are totally fine.
And Taron Johnson, the Northwestern transfer, like, he could be the starter. He could be the number 3. I don't really know. Rod Pleasant, we'll see. He got in towards more like the end of the season this year. Obviously was running track in the spring, kind of not stunted his development, but kind of slowed it down just because it's hard to do 2 sports at once. And then, if we're counting nickels, like Dalen Austin, I think is going to be the starting nickel this upcoming season. So there's a lot of talent there. It's just, can they put it together, and can they go out there on the field and perform? Because I think a lot of people expected that to happen last year. And then obviously Jabbar Muhammad was an obvious addition. And then, Nico Reed kind of stole the show and just developed under 2 years at Oregon and was one of the better corners in the Big Ten last year. So could be another story like that where it's a guy you just don't really see, but there's a ton of talent on that 2024, 2023 class coming in too.
And the thing to note, Theron Johnson and Roderick Pleasant are the only corners on the team that are under 6 feet tall next season. So the group's getting bigger. Dakota Fields was hurt, but him and Iffy both like 6'2", like will be redshirt freshmen next season. So the size of the position is increasing.
Yeah, I won't say that's the entirety of their issues in the Ohio State game. I think there's some other issues at play for sure. But Jeremiah Smith happens to be pretty talented and hard to cover regardless of personnel. But I do think getting bigger doesn't hurt. And especially when you looked at this last year's secondary where we were concerned all year about the lack of size, I don't think it was really a problem until maybe the last game. And even then, like I said, I think you can excuse some of that to
what it wasn't a problem all year.
No. Getting bigger doesn't hurt though. Safety, I'm inclined to say we're good there with Thieneman and whichever young player you see developing next to him.
Yeah, and Kobe Savage, I think, still has a chance to come back. So
true.
I don't know.
True. Yeah.
I don't know. This is one where I might lean yes. There's just no proven commodity behind Thieneman and maybe Savage, and that's kind of all Oregon needs if Savage does come back, just because they don't really rotate at safety basically ever. But Woodyard, Flowers, Kingston Lopa, like those are guys who I think have high potential. And then if you want to include nickel for this, Dalen Austin, I think has high potential, but we just haven't really seen it. And obviously, the staff really likes Woodyard. He's one of, what is there, 2 freshmen to use up their red shirt?
Yeah, it was just 2.
Yeah. And he played most of that in special teams, to be clear. But, he had a lot more snaps than Flowers did last year. I think Flowers only saw time in 1 game. I think it was against Washington at the very end. So they've got a lot of confidence in him. But this is one to me where I'd think about adding somebody. Again, it maybe a caveat for every one of these positions is if there's a guy who could be an instant impact addition. Maybe not a guy who you could develop down the line, but someone who can come in and immediately play boundary or free safety.
Maybe position versatility. I don't know. Daniel and I agree with Jared's point of pretty locked in at nickel, but maybe he can bounce back to the back end. I don't know, maybe. But I would take a guy. But problem is, just like the linebacker spot, after Dylan, there really wasn't anyone that was like, you have to take. So we'll see what happens in the portal at the safety position in the spring. But for now, yeah, you ride with it. Even if Kobe Savage comes back, though, and there's a guy in the portal that's worth taking, I think you do it. You just treat it just like you did with the cornerback room the last couple of years of, like, you gotta keep fighting for your spot. Just because you had it doesn't mean you get it next year.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's recap this. Where did we land talking all this through? I don't know. To me, it feels like linebacker. It just does, just because of the lack of secondary guys. I don't think you need a starter, but I think you need to get depth there. But that speaks, I think, to the totality of this roster and like the lack of, like, is there a plug and play starter needed remaining on this roster right now? And I don't know if the answer is yes. And if the answer is not, linebacker would be the position I probably feel like you could use a little bit more depth at.
Probably not for the plug and play starter, other than right guard, maybe, or left guard, whatever they feel comfortable with Dave at. Just depending on if Bedford can bounce back. I think if he can, he could be good, but you're relying on a lot there. I think linebacker would be a positive development if they added somebody just as like a pure depth piece, maybe with the chance to start, but probably not with Devin and Bryce coming back. Then for me, I'm always going to say tight end and maybe a running back.
I think the glaring one is just linebacker for me. That's the big one. Everything else is kind of luxury at this point, and there's not a lot of room. So you got to figure out your biggest issue, and I think we all kind of agree it's probably linebacker, or something on the defense. But find someone that can fit your glaring need, and from there it's just luxury.
And Matt, just the last thing here before we move on to the next question. I know you had a projection on the 105, and a reminder to listeners, the NCAA is increasing scholarships from 85, or roster numbers, I should say, from 85 to 105. Where did that land when you finished that exercise? Just give readers maybe a quick sneak peek and then tell me.
I published it and it was 103, but now it's 102 because like half a day later, Gardner went to the portal. So it's at 103, but what makes it really difficult, I made some assumptions doing it. I basically didn't count any of the walk-ons that haven't played in their career or haven't traveled for a majority of the regular season. I don't think Brock Thomas got in a game this season, but he was a regular guy that traveled. So he made the list. But then Ryder Lyons, another quarterback, he didn't travel outside of, I think, the Big Ten championship game and the Rose Bowl. So I did not include him. That's where it gets murky. If every single walk-on comes back, which I highly doubt, that has eligibility, they're way over the limit. But I made some assumptions, but right now they're right around 102 guys. And that's factoring in Kobe Savage, Jamari Caldwell, George Silva, all having eligibility and available to them and using it. Until they declare they're not using it, I'll include them.
Okay. Yeah, that's up on Duck Territory if you want to go check that out. And that is going to be something we'll be updating all off season.
And interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, they could just say to hell with it, all the walk-ons, and just get 20 more actual scholarship players. I don't know how they're going to do that. It's gonna be sad next year walking into fall practice without any walk-ons. That's all I'm gonna say.
We asked Huffman or Biggins that a while ago, and I think I can't remember who it was, but they basically said that a lot of schools probably won't be able to convince players because it's to be the 105th scholarship guy, because it's like,
oh yeah,
you're gonna come and I'm already having to sit a while, but now I know I'm the 105th guy instead of the 85th guy. Like that's gonna be a hard sell. So I think walk-ons will still exist, but to Jared's point, there just won't be nearly as many of them, which will suck. Like the Bryce Betcher story, does it happen under this current scenario? I don't know.
Probably not.
It probably is. It probably happens where he's at a junior college first and has to prove his way onto the roster. Yeah, it probably doesn't happen organically like it did with this one.
Correct.
So yeah, that's the walk-ons maybe being squeezed out is kind of a sad development if that's how this fully plays out down the line. I don't know if that'll be entirely what happens, but there's just so many storylines that come from that, and so many. Almost every season, there's a critical piece of the offense or defense, even at a school like Oregon that started as a walk-on. So I'd be bummed out to lose that. Obviously, there's ways to improve your roster by diminishing the number of players like that on it. But just kind of a thing to keep an eye on here as we enter another offseason with a lot of change. Okay, second one came from at Roger BA 181738807. A lot of numbers from Raj for this one. Okay, he asks, assuming Ohio State beats Notre Dame, where do you think the Ducks land in the final AP poll? And he notes, my Homer self thinks number 2 or number 3. This is sort of interesting. This doesn't have to be a very long conversation. I think they'd be number 3, based upon the fact that Oregon has 1 loss, and if Notre Dame loses to Ohio State, everybody would have more than that. Notre Dame, I think, should be ahead of Oregon, as much as it hurts to say, because I would not have made that argument at all 2 weeks ago. But they have beaten Georgia, they have beaten Penn State, and they've also won, like, what is it now, like 12 games in a row, 13 games in a row, something like that. I think it's hard, especially if they're competitive in this national championship game, not to have them at number 2. And I guess on the Oregon side of where the AP voters choose to place them, I'm curious to just the magnitude and the way that looked. If there's some voters that drop Oregon significantly further than I'm thinking based upon the totality of the season. But we do have to remember Oregon was consensus number 1 the last time they did this AP poll. Obviously, there'll be a lot more data that'll have changed. But at the same time, you have to think that the voters will respect their vote from prior to postseason play, where they had Oregon at number 1, and so they would keep them in that top 3, I think. I'm trying to sell myself on Texas or Penn State possibly jumping Oregon. I don't know if Texas actually won enough quality games, and Oregon had the head-to-head with Penn State. So 3 would be where my guess would be.
Yeah, I could see 3. I feel it's more like 4 or 5. I find it hard at the end of the year when they take a team like Oregon that didn't get to the Final Four and still put them in the top 4. I feel like they should, like the people who made the Final Four who actually won the game should have some sort of kudos and be a top 4 team. Not that anything at the end of the year AP poll matters, because it just matters who won it all and finishes number 1. I could see 4 or 5. I guess I could see 3. The Texas argument, like they didn't win a game during the entire regular season other than against Alabama, against Georgia. No, they lost against Georgia. Like
they have like no good wins.
They have no good wins, and now they have 1. So that's better than 0. But they were number 3 like all season long. So the AP voters didn't mind it then. They could put them in that 3 or 4 spot again this time around. Penn State had a good playoff run, 2 dubs. Not that bad. Like, I don't know. I think Oregon could be as high as 3. I think they could be as low as 5. I don't think they'll drop to 6, but I also think it's going to matter that they were down by 34 points at one point during their playoff game, and that they got the absolute crap kicked out of them on the national stage in front of 100,000 fans, in front of millions of people at the Rose Bowl. I think that'll still resonate with people when deciding whether or not they should be higher than Penn State, even though Oregon did win the Big Ten championship game over them. I think people will quickly forget that because Penn State won 2 games and Oregon got their butts kicked. So we'll see.
I'm expecting 5 because, like Jared said, I think if you get to the semifinals, you should just kind of, not de facto, but have a big push.
You should be 1 through 4. Yeah. Those are the 4 final teams.
So I'm expecting 5. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they were 6, just because of how bad they got beat, how uncompetitive it was in the first half against Ohio State. But the problem is, who do you put ahead of them? I don't know. I don't have that answer. But I'm expecting 5. They could maybe be 4 or 3 ahead of Texas and ahead of Penn State. But I kind of feel like if you got to win your games to get in there, and they did, and Oregon didn't.
Well, to me, it just totally comes down to how we're weighting postseason versus the totality of the resume. Because, again, if you go totality of resume, Oregon probably has a case to be 2. But if you're going to go into the most recent stuff, which
you should
matter,
yeah,
then you can see, I think Oregon dropped down, into that 4 or 5 range. I think this is actually be kind of interesting, which is why I included the question. To Jared's point, this doesn't mean really anything at all, aside from on the Wikipedia page next to Oregon's season, the final rank thing that it has in the far right columns. So this doesn't actually mean anything, to be totally clear. But just from what the voters do, I am a little bit curious to see. And I know it matters to fans too, in terms of where the season ended to some degree. Although for a lot of the fans that it might matter to, I think they've kind of don't care about this team very much anymore. So with that in mind, maybe we should jump to the next section where we get into the next part of the year here. Matt, a little bit of a break here before we come back and wrap this.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finish up the second half of the show. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. 2 questions in, 2 more to go.
And this one from, I think these are like all basically first-time askers. So thanks, guys, for joining in here. Yeah, this one from @BigfootActual. Okay. With Dante poised to take the helm, do you think the offense evolves from the screen and shot mentality? And then he asks, who benefits most if it does? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. How much do we think the offense will change based upon personnel at quarterback under Will Stein? And how much, I guess, do we think it changed this last year?
Will Stein told me everything starts with quarterback. At Rose Bowl. I'll have a story up kind of on this topic later this week, but I flat up asked him, like, how do you – Dylan and – I was trying to ask him a question about how was the offense so good when Dylan and Bo are completely different quarterbacks, and yet statistically the numbers are kind of similar to a degree. And he said it all just starts with the quarterback. We sit down and look at what the quarterback can do, what he understands, what he likes, and then we build off that, and the branches go in all the directions based on everything else. So it starts 100% with what the quarterback likes.
Yeah, I don't think it changes too much. I just think it reiterates what Matt just said. Like, the offense is there. They just pick from the book which fits the quarterback. Like, you saw plays that Bo Nix ran that Dylan Gabriel didn't. You saw Dylan Gabriel plays that Bo Nix didn't run. Like, I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference. I think there's still going to be the baseline, what Will Stein likes to do with his RPOs, with his deep shots down the field, with his screen passes. Like, I think the crux of this question that was asked, I've seen a lot on Oregon Twitter over the last week or so, is the people seem to be frustrated with running screens. This is what modern football is. This is what Chip Kelly did 12 years ago. This is what football has kind of evolved into as a progression of the run game. And when you do it against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, like, did you want to go run the ball? Was that working so well? Like, you have to figure out ways to get the ball to your playmakers in space. That's what Will Stein told us before the season. He basically said, like, guys, this isn't that really that hard. Like, I just get the ball to the playmaker in space, have them do the work, and they go score a touchdown. Like, that was the knock on Bo Nix coming out of the draft, was that he was a check down merchant. His ADOT was really low. He was running all these screen passes. But if you watch the man, you know that was just part of the offense. He had plenty of deep shots. He had plenty of mid-range throws, 15, 20 yards down the field. He found guys in play action looks. Like, Dylan Gabriel did all the same stuff. Maybe didn't do as many deep shots, but I don't think this offense evolves away from the screen and shot. Like, that's what Will Stein runs. This is a run-friendly offense that takes 2 shots a quarter. That's what it's been with Kenny Dillingham. That's what it's been with Will Stein the last 2 years. Like, just because Dante Moore and his 6'5" frame and his big arm is coming in doesn't mean the offense is going to change from this screen and shot. That's just what Will Stein's offense is. And that's what a lot of good offenses are. Like, go look at all the ones in the college football playoff right now, except for Notre Dame. They're all like screen and shot guys.
I was going to say, what was the first Ohio State touchdown against Oregon?
It was a screen to Jeremiah Smith. Yeah.
Got a really dynamic guy in space, and he scored a touchdown.
It works.
Yeah. So, and that's not to say people are wrong for being frustrated for there being, quote unquote, too many screens. Like, I get that at times where it feels like that it's overly dependent upon that. Expecting them to totally wipe that out of the offense or to diminish, like, cut that amount in half or something, I think is very unlikely to happen. So I will be curious, because we don't have quite as much. I know he had the year at UCLA. We don't have quite as much career history with Dante as we do. And we have to know, could be Dante, could be Austin, could be a couple, this doesn't have to be Dante Moore. That's just become the assumption based upon everything behind the scenes and some of the comments. But with Dante or with Austin, we don't have quite the, I guess, just history of their where their success is going to be had, like we did with Dylan or like we had with Bo. So maybe it's a little harder right now to assess where they're going to lean the most this year with one of those guys. But I certainly don't think it's totally eliminating screen passes. And frankly, I think the one thing I'd like to see, and I know I'm not alone in this, is just a little bit more aggressiveness throwing down the field, which at times was a really big part of their most successful games. Obviously, think of the Ohio State game. You think about what happened against Michigan. I know some of those were kind of scramble drills with Trayshawn, but just the ability to throw the ball down the field, which Dylan was low-key very, very good at times on connecting on those. Dante is somebody that's one of his like calling cards. We know that's something he's good at based upon his career so far. So I guess I will be curious to see kind of how this shifts a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be like a total move away from what they've done in the last 3 years.
Even if it's still the same, like, why are we complaining? It's produced 2 Heisman finalists. Like,
yeah.
The success rate's pretty good. And I'm of the belief, just like from where the players come from, I don't really care where they come from or how the ball gets from point A to point B, but as long as it gets from point A to point B. And if all of a sudden the screen game and the deep shot combination starts to fail more than it's successful, then you look at it. But right now, the two quarterbacks under Will Stein's time at Oregon have set program records, have set national records for a quarterback position, and have both been Heisman finalists. So I think it's kind of hard to argue the proof in the pudding here. It's pretty good.
Yeah, both those guys were also their conference player of the years, and especially the 2023 case, an absolutely loaded quarterback class in the Pac-12.
Yeah. My last thing I'll say on this. Yeah. Yeah, my last thing I'll say on this is, like, for those who do complain about the offense, like, yeah, it was different this year with Dillon Gabriel. I just think that a lot of Oregon fans were maybe a little spoiled with having Bo Nix the year before, who had, I don't know, probably a top 15, top 20 passing season in college football history.
It's up there, man. It's
like
unbelievable.
45 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 74% completion percentage, 4,500 yards. Like, those in a normal year, to be clear, are like Heisman winning caliber numbers. And he just didn't. He happened to have this incredible quarterback class all at the same time. I think it was this year. It was just that Bo Nix was a bit of a luxury, and then that it wasn't necessarily appreciated as much because the offense, it looked so easy. It's like, why don't they just do this all the time? It's like, well, you have to have the quarterback who can do this all the time and make it look this easy. And Dillon was great this year. I thought he was a wonderful quarterback. He wasn't as good as Bo Nix, and that's fine. He wasn't as good as probably maybe the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, but a future first-round pick. Like, that's okay. He was a great quarterback. He was a Heisman finalist. He was a Big Ten Player of the Year. Like, these are fine. These are fine things to have on your resume. It just the offense wasn't as smooth as it was a season ago. They also played much better defenses this year in the Big Ten. So there were no ASU, other than Purdue, there were no ASU 2-10 on the end of the season type defenses. So I just think people are frustrated because that's an easy thing to look at, especially after the Rose Bowl performance. But this was a really good offensive team this past year. It was a really good in 2023, 2024. Like, this is a good offense. There's no reason to change it. I'm sure plenty of people would love to have Will Stein as their offensive coordinator, their head coach. It's just that it's a good thing that he's here.
This is the difference between a first-round draft pick quarterback and like a third or a fourth-round draft pick quarterback. And not trying to say Dillon Gabriel is bad because he was terrific, but to Jared's point, we underappreciated Bo Nix, and he's simply better. And there's a reason why he was picked in the first round. There's a reason why he played in the playoffs as a rookie. I think Dillon's going to be on an NFL roster next season. I don't think he's going to be a starter next season.
Yeah, that's all fair. I haven't done the exercise, but Jared, you said top 15 to 20 statistical season. It might be better. I don't know. 77% completion percentage, 4,500 yards, 45 touchdowns, 3 picks, just purely passing. Like, it's quite good. It's quite good. That might be an exercise to look into sometime later today, just to kind of like, okay, where would you actually stack that up just objectively based on stats? All right. Last one here from @RJ Duckface. We're moving to a little hoops talk to finish. Kwame Evans seems to finally coming into his own as men's hoops fight through its first season in the Big Ten. Who do you think will be key in the second half of the season if the Ducks are to make a deep run? Matt, we're going to start with you, as you are our Oregon men's beat writer, and you're following this. I'm watching the games, but you are following this closer than I am. First off, I agree. Kwame does seem to be figuring it out a little bit, which was nice. He had a real lull there after the first couple of games. But to hit to the question here from RJ, who else is kind of crucial for this team to make a run? Which, by the way, just a couple of heart attack-inducing wins over the weekend.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is Shellstead. Biddle's been consistent all year. But you look at Shellstead in the last, 4 games that he's had. I'm going to pull his stats up really quickly because I had Kwame up. But in the last 3 games, Shellstead has made 12 out of 16 3-pointers. Every single one of them feels like it's a pretty significant basket. And the one he made from like half court almost is like a Pritchard level one. He's turned things around. This season, he was shooting low 20s from 3-point percentage. He's now above 36% and almost 37. His hot shooting has really turned things around here a little bit. He's averaging over 20 points a game the last 3. He's hit back-to-back kind of like game-winning baskets for Oregon. So that's number one. And then I'll be honest, like I don't know what they do right now with Brandon Angel and Kwame Evans, because Kwame has improved. He's figured things out. On the post-game radio show yesterday, assistant coach Kevin McKenna talked about how he's starting to play tougher, and he's playing through contact down low, which he hasn't really done a ton of in his career. 5 of the last 6 games, he scored in double figures. He is playing really well for Oregon. And then on the flip side, Brandon Angel he's not performing like a starter should. He's made just 4 baskets in his last 3 games after attempting 13 shots. So he's not shooting it well. He hasn't made a 3-pointer since the Illinois game, and that didn't really help because no one played well in that one. His rebounding numbers are significantly down in the last 3, starting to pick up some fouls. So I don't know what they do here. Like, he's the more experienced player. He's probably got the higher floor than Kwame Evans does, but the potential is going to side with Evans. If both players maximize their potential, Kwame's the better player. But it's going to be interesting. I don't think they're going to probably change the starting lineup, but it wouldn't surprise me if this turns into more of a 20-20 minute split than a 25-15 like it has been for most of the year, because Kwame deserves to play and should play, and Angel's not performing like a starter right now.
Yeah, my pick was going to be Brandon Angel, just because through non-conference play, I was such a fan of what he'd been doing, or at least like the first 9 to 10 games. We haven't done a lot of basketball talk on the pod, Matt, but that was like a player I highlighted then as somebody who just really stood out in terms of kind of just knowing where to be, just being that veteran presence, the IQ, the ability to score and pass and shoot the 3 and play defense at a high level. And I just don't know where that's gone. And yeah, at this point, he's almost a bit of a liability at times out there, which has been really kind of confusing in terms of just the season trajectory. So that would be a name I would throw out of just to somebody, again, who doesn't cover the team quite like Matt does and who just kind of is watching it casually. That's somebody who I had a really high approval rate, I guess I would say, on through like the middle of December, and whatever's happened the last month or so has not been kind of what I thought. And to your point, Matt, maybe Kwame just solves this and says, hey, I'm the better player. I'll take those minutes and Oregon will be a fine for it. But I do worry when you get into some of these, and they've handled business really well against quality competition of late. But when they've got a nice stretch coming up here with some tough opponents, I think you need your senior leadership to step up. And I'm hoping he's one of those guys who does.
And then there's also the TJ Bamba stuff. Like he's maybe their best like wing defender, on-ball defender that they have. He's a very physical player. He's their best guy at attacking the rim, but he is not a good jump shot shooter. And I think in the last 4 or 5 games, like he's fell into the trap of shooting threes. Against Penn State in the first half, he was 3 of 5. He didn't take any 3-pointers. He was getting to the basket. He had 8 points. He had a couple free throw attempts. And then in the second half, he shot the ball 5 times. 4 of them were threes. He didn't make any of them. He missed another jumper, and he only scored 2 points. And it was essentially benched towards the end of the game as they came back because he got away from his game. I think some of these guys are still kind of figuring out their roles, and he needs to figure out that he's not one of the 3-point shooters. If you're completely wide open, take it. But if you get the look and it's a decent look, but if you can do the skip pass to get a wide open Bartholomew, like swing it. You're not the 3-point shooter. And that still kind of hasn't hit yet. If it does, and he realizes that he's the slasher, the attacker, the Dylan Brooks, if you will, Elgin Cook type guy that in this offense, he could have 13 points a game, but he just is starting to float out to the 3-point line and just kind of hover there. If you look at his best games, they're all ones where he gets to the free throw line and shoots a lot of layups by attacking the hoop.
And good coaches are going to force him to take those threes because they know if all of us could figure out that TJ Bamba's not the best 3-point shooter, I bet a college coach can. And that's what you got to prepare for if you're Dana Altman. You have to figure out how to get him moving in the half court and maybe try to push the ball in transition, which I think is maybe another place Kwame could help, just as the more athletic guy than Angel. And like Matt said earlier, like if Kwame reaches his potential, that's a much higher floor, much higher potential ceiling than nearly almost anybody on the roster, just because of how good he is and how well he fits in like an NBA body type in that 6'9", 6'10" with a long wingspan and able to play defense. And I think the other thing that I've noticed is just it's important that they've had a guy like Shelstad to step up. I think everybody kind of wanted that from him last season. I don't know if he was physically, mentally ready for that. He seems a lot more ready this season, at least to start. With him and Biddle, I like that 2-man combination. It's nice to see Biddle like kind of stepping up to maybe his potential as a high school kid coming out of where is he from? Medford, I think it was. I don't know if we'll ever get to that level, but it's nice to see him step back and hit 3-pointers. Nice to see him control the paint and use his size and his strength at this point in his 4th year. But we'll see. It's a great start. I will say the only thing is like if you're Dana and you need to figure out stuff, like now's the time to do it. You want to lose in January. You don't want to lose in March or potentially April. Like these are the times to really kind of hone in and figure out what your rotation is going to be. But shoot, I mean, they're going to be, I don't know when the polls released today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Top 10 team again. Yeah. Not bad. Yeah. It's fine.
They might be top 10. I mean, 5 teams, I think, lost ahead of them. 6 teams lost ahead of them. But to Jared's point of like football polls, right now the polls are kind of pointless. It's just a good way of getting people excited about the team. But nonetheless, their resume is, it's, to you guys' point, it's an exciting time because their resume, while they're not playing like it, their resume shows that their metrics are a 1, 2, or a 3 seed type team. They're tied for the most quad 1 wins in the country at 7. 4 of those have come away from home. I think 6 of those have come in neutral site or road games. They're beating good teams. They've got ranked wins next to their name. And their only 2 losses are a banked 3-pointer from deep and a 30-point drubbing, which you can kind of maybe chalk up as just a really bad night and a really awesome night for the other team. But right now they're really good. And Purdue comes to town on Saturday, which we'll learn a lot, I think, in that one. I would not be surprised if they win. I would not be surprised if they kind of struggle and lose that game as well.
That's one that hopefully there's fan support for. I know Dana was kind of pushing for that. I've got a group of friends. I think we're planning on trying to head over and check that out. Matt, I won't be covering on press row, but I plan on being there for that. And hopefully they play pretty well and add to that quad 1 victory total there.
Yeah, hopefully it's a sellout. Should be, but we'll see. See if this fan base gets behind it. All right, I think that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for submitting the questions as always. You can go read all our work at duckterritory.com. But until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.